Welcome to a realm where personal growth meets expansive spirituality and where we're not just scratching the surface. We're diving deep, widening our perspectives, and having a darn good time doing it. This is the Enlightened Podcast, and I am your host, Jen Hamilton. You'll enjoy an infusion of motivation, empowerment, and inspiration that will resonate in every aspect of your life. Expect captivating stories, heartfelt musings, and my own personal experiences. But that's not all. I'm bringing awe-inspiring individuals to the table, so get ready to meet some remarkable souls whose wisdom and stories will leave you spellbound. No topic is off limits here. Brace yourself for raw authenticity, unfiltered vulnerability, and yes, the occasional splash of explicit language. We're delving into the realms of the esoteric, mystical, and the woo-woo, unafraid to explore the extraordinary. So if you are ready to venture beyond the surface, to explore the depths of your soul, and to awaken the magic of life, if your heart says yes, then hit that play button and let the Enlightened Podcast guide you on this remarkable expedition. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Enlightened Podcast. I am your host, Jen Hamilton, and my very special guest today is Alisha Carlson. Alisha is a non-diet lifestyle coach and the founder of Strong Her Way. She works with women using her non-diet approach to food, fitness, and life transformation to help her clients create a healthy and balanced lifestyle without dieting, deprivation, or restriction. Alisha teaches women how to radically love themselves, their bodies, and their lives before they ever lose a pound by healing their relationship to food, exercise, their bodies, and themselves. Alisha and I had a beautiful conversation where we both shared parts of our journey being women and being exposed to the dieting culture. And no doubt to all of our listeners, you have experienced some form of this in your life. There is so much wisdom, so many gold nuggets in this episode. I know you're going to love it. So without further ado, let's dive in. Welcome, Alisha. Thank you so much for joining me on the Enlightened Podcast.
Hey, Jen, thanks so much for having me.
Now, you do some pretty incredible things in this world. You're a non-diet lifestyle coach. That sounds amazing. Tell us all about what it is that you do and what is your magic to the world?
Yeah, I do think it's pretty amazing work. So as kind of a, I don't know, maybe reformed dieter myself, I know how much time and energy can really be kind of directed toward that specific area of our lives, whether it's food or tracking our food or working out or calories. And so my work as a non-diet lifestyle coach is really centered around helping women heal their relationship to food, to exercise, to their bodies. But the most foundational work is working on your relationship to yourself.
Beautiful. Tell us about your journey that's brought you through this to life. You sort of mentioned that you've been in this space before and now you've sort of come out the other end and obviously you're helping other women through that. What did that look like for you when you were sort of in the thick of it?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really grow up in a family that exercised, or sports weren't even really something that was heavily pushed on us growing up. So for me, I really ended up getting into kind of the dieting stuff sort of on my own. I always kind of felt like I was a little bit maybe overweight or in a larger body than my other friends. And of course, the messages in the media, I think at the time, the trendy body style was really that long, lean kind of quote unquote yoga body or Pilates body. And looking at it now, I'm like, that is just not how my body was made. And so it's funny to think that I would have ever aspired for that to be kind of my ideal beauty standard. But for me, the journey really started or kind of kicked off in 2007. So that was the year that my now husband and I were getting married. And like most women, I wanted to look good. I wanted to feel good walking down the aisle that day. And so I embarked on, a weight loss journey. And this really was the first time that I was able to stick with something longer than a few days, because in past attempts, I would start a diet, I would start a workout program, I wouldn't see results 3 days, 4 days in, and I would just be like, oh my gosh, this isn't going to work, or this isn't working. Or I would be so miserable that I would just give up. And so, for whatever reason, a switch was flipped in 2007. And I really figured out how to diet, how to lose weight successfully, right? I was able to keep it off for a decade, but it felt like I was constantly in kind of this battle with myself, with my body, and with the scale. And it wasn't really until 2018 that I really had what I call kind of my come to Jesus moment, where it was like, why is this so hard? Why does this feel like it is just taking up so much of my life? And for me, like with my faith background, I truly do believe it was like that still small voice of the Holy Spirit that was like, it's because you've been dieting this whole time and calling it a lifestyle. And that really kind of stopped me in my tracks. Took a step back, had to really reevaluate how I was approaching food and exercise. And that really is where kind of the non-diet lifestyle coaching was birthed.
That sounds fantastic. The journey that you've been on with that. Was there a particular moment, a catalyst that was that was your come to Jesus moment where it was like, oh, this is not working, or I need to do this differently, or is this who I continually want to be? Was there a defining moment in there for you, Alicia?
Yeah, so actually, I remember it quite distinctly. I call this, these are those diamond moments where it is kind of that eye-opening thing. And once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Hmm.
And so for me, I was standing in my kitchen. I had my camera propped up, had the timer on. I was in, sports bra and probably swimsuit bottoms. And I was taking before pictures yet again. And I have my degree at this point in exercise science. I've been studying nutrition. I've been studying all these things. And I felt so discouraged and so defeated. And like, what am I missing? Why am I failing at this? Why can't I just lose the weight and keep it off and it not feel like it was consuming my life? And so it was really standing in that moment and feeling just so defeated, so discouraged, that it was like, if a healthy lifestyle, in my opinion, should be as easy to live as like a quote unquote unhealthy lifestyle. And so that really was kind of the catalyst for the change and the direction that I've gone.
And once that dropped in for you, what started to shift? Was it your mindset first? Was it almost like you gave your permission slip to just let everything go and just live your life? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, I think for me, just having that epiphany that really the only difference is that it was like the way that I was approaching the nutrition or the exercise, right? So it wasn't necessarily about the actions of watching what I was eating or exercising or doing different things like that, but it was more of like, where was I coming from a heart space? Where was I coming from mentally? And that really kind of took me down the rabbit trail of studying. I think that was kind of around the first time I had heard the words diet culture and had heard about the anti-diet movement and intuitive eating and health at every size. And well, I would say there are things about health at every size or intuitive eating that I'm still kind of like, I don't know. I feel like in some senses it's kind of given birth to the exact opposite of diet culture. But for me, part of that freedom really was kind of releasing the reins on what I was eating and allowing myself to eat foods that I hadn't eaten in a long time without feeling restricted around it. So there were aspects of the intuitive eating format or framework that I started to incorporate. I think that really helped me kind of challenge a lot of the beliefs that I had about food and really started to work on the mindset, but also reconnecting with my body, because dieting does the exact opposite. It completely disconnects us from our body. A lot of times we're hungry and we're like, oh, I can't eat because I'm out of calories for the day, or I've overeaten, this macro, so I can't have any more food. And so that was a part of the journey as well, was reconnecting to my body.
And going through that reconnection, how did that feel for you?
It felt scary. If I can be just completely vulnerable and honest, it
Mm.
felt very scary because so much of my life had been wrapped around weight loss or wrapped around trying to fit like a certain beauty standard or a beauty norm. And so there was this real fear of gaining the weight back or gaining weight. And then what was I going to be left with, right? Like, would I be as valuable? Would I be as worthy in a larger body as I was at a smaller body? And of course, the answer is yes. Like our size, the amount of money we make, none of that stuff contributes to our value as human beings. But that really was kind of an unlearning and a relearning that I had to do. So I initially felt terrified, but I also started to really relax into the process and started to feel some relief, I think, with how much more headspace I felt like I had that I was because I wasn't, tracking food meticulously or thinking about my body all the time too. Like that was incredibly exhausting.
Mm. What are some of the things that you found, growing up and being exposed to that really, catalyzed your experience of having to go through this diet culture or thinking, that your worth was tied into how you looked or, your weight and what you ate? Was there any particular movies that you saw, or was it, was it your mother or aunties or people around you? Like, do you know what it was that sort of framed this for you from a young age?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the obvious one is the media, right? I grew up, thankfully, when social media wasn't a thing. I'm so glad about that. But we had all the magazines, we had the movies, we had, different TV shows where it really was looking at celebrities and what are they doing. And it really is kind of this unrealistic expectation that is placed on women where you're supposed to be small, but not too small. Otherwise, people, oh, she has an eating disorder or whatever. But you can't be too big because then there's a problem with that there too. So I think it was definitely the social and cultural messages that were out there, but also listening to how my mom talked about her body, how my grandma maybe talked about her body or other women's bodies. Excuse me, how, one of my aunts in particular, there was a lot of emphasis, like constantly trying new diets. There was the slim fast, the, certain diet pills and things like that. And, I think the overarching message that I feel like I really received growing up is that your weight and what your body looks like is, I don't know the best way to put it, but it's like the currency for life, right? So it's like the more you fit kind of that societal norm of being thin, having a certain aesthetic look, then the more value that you had as a woman. And so I think for me, that was really challenging. My mom grew up with horrible self esteem, and I saw that demonstrated in the way that she treated herself, would talk about herself, kind of putting herself down, compared to other women. And yeah, so I think just those were kind of the key influences that I really remember.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And, there was a lot of, movies that we watched, like even looking at the Disney movies, I mean, all the Disney princesses, this tiny little waist, or if it was like, in, say, for example, in The Little Mermaid, Ursula was sort of the big fat woman, so it was, ingrained really early on that the princess was always, this tiny, slim, beautiful woman, but then the bad person was always this, this big, ugly person kind of thing. And then music that we would listen to and video clips that we would watch, and then, like you said, the magazines, the things that we were exposed to in the media. Like,
Mhm.
of course we've all ended up, a little fucked up from this, of course we have. And I think now, when we get into, our, it could be 20s for some people, if you're lucky enough, 30s, 40s, 50s, we get to go through this unfucking process.
Mhm.
you know what are you seeing is, quite a pattern that women are coming to you with? Is it the same thing that you're seeing? Is it the same thing that, they've been exposed to this diet culture, and they're on, that hamster wheel of, I need to lose weight, or I need to do this, or I need to be on the next big thing?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely notice some tendencies with a lot of the women that I work with. They tend to be very high achieving, kind of overachieving, oftentimes overbooking themselves, stretching themselves too thin, a lot of perfectionistic tendencies, maybe competitive athletes kind of at a former period of their life. Which gives birth to a lot of disordered patterns around food and exercise. And I think, what's interesting is that a lot of my clients come kind of with a weight loss goal, but I think because I market myself as a non-diet coach, we're going to tackle the weight loss, but probably in a more unconventional method, right? So a lot of us are used to, okay, here's how many calories you should be eating or how many macros. Here's a workout plan, just plug and play, do the program, get the results. But what I was finding when I was practicing coaching that way, because that was initially kind of how I started, there's so much else that's happening in your life that usually prevents you from getting the workout in, or there's stress and there's an emotional response, or you're not giving yourself enough time to relax to be able to think about what you want to eat and be more intentional, so you're just grabbing stuff that's convenient and that's easy. So while the weight loss is kind of a component, more so, it's like, I want to learn how to be healthy and not diet anymore. I want to learn how to just have kind of this healthy, balanced lifestyle that doesn't feel like it's sucking the life out of me. So I would say, people kind of come with an expectation that, yeah, if you have a weight loss goal, we're going to work on it, but it's probably not going to be the method that you're used to.
And how do you find clients go when, they might have, a weight or a size goal in mind, but they want to do it in more of a, like a holistic way of doing it through non-diet. Do you find that it naturally starts to shift the more they're kinder to themselves and the more that they practice self-love, self-acceptance? Do you find that it's almost like a quicker process because they've stopped obsessing over it and coming from a place of love?
Well, it might not be quicker in the short term, right? Because you can lose weight fairly fast. You might not be very happy or a super enjoyable person to be around, and it's not necessarily going to be sustainable, right? So I would say that the process of losing weight doesn't necessarily maybe happen quite as quick as what you might be used to with traditional dieting methods. But when it's the easiest weight that you've ever lost, and it's weight that's never coming back because you've actually changed on kind of a foundational, fundamental level from the inside out, then it doesn't matter how long it takes because you're never going to be going down this road again.
Mm.
So I would say, it's the more that you can kind of lean into the process and be willing to challenge a lot of the beliefs and patterns and habits that you've utilized in the past that maybe were successful for a short period, the more you can embrace the process and lean into that, the quicker you will have results. But it can take a little time to kind of undo some of that wiring that we've all been steeped in for so long.
Oh, it runs so deep, doesn't it? And even myself, like I've gone through so many different, not sort of long-term hardcore dieting, but I went through a phase of, the keto drinks and the intermittent fasting. And, I've gone through, trying to starve myself to fit into a dress for the following week, or, binge eating, all
Mhm.
the sort of the different things that, that there is to cycle through. And at the end of the day, I'm like, this is not sparking joy. Like, I don't like who I am when I'm in this.
Yeah.
I just want to come to a place where I'm loving my life. I'm loving my food. I'm loving the journey. I'm loving my body.
Mhm.
And I'm at that place in my life where it's just like, oh, I don't have to obsess over this. It doesn't matter anymore. And I think that's definitely come with age for me as well. Like, there was a very big focus on this in my 20s.
Mhm.
And I was the type of person, and in the different lines of work that I've had, but I was absolutely validated on my looks.
Mhm.
I remember going through a separation at the end of 2017, and I'd gone through, it was separated with my fiance. We had two kids together. And I lost a lot of weight very quickly in
Mm-hmm.
a very, very unhealthy manner. And people that I hadn't seen for quite some time would say, wow, you look amazing. And so not only was I, experiencing complete external validation because I was absolutely broken on the inside, but I thought to myself, well, I can't ever change these ways because that's the validation that I'm not giving myself that I need. So I can't ever get off this train because
Mm-hmm.
people are finally noticing me. People are finally, giving me attention. And I've worked for modeling agencies, I've worked in, the promotions industry, so it is about how you look. It is
Mm-hmm.
about your body, and it can be, really toxic as well because you're constantly comparing yourself to other people, and to other body types or being compared.
Mm-hmm.
I was told, oh, you'd be able to get up on stage if you just lost a little bit around the middle and this, that, and the other. And like, I was so impressionable,
Mm-hmm.
or the times where, after the separation, I was back in the dating game, it was being validated for how I looked, and it's almost like being chosen as well. If you look a certain way, you're chosen by a man. And I had sustained proof to support my belief system, so all that kept doing was kept reiterating this negative cycle of thinking. And it wasn't until everything just sort of broke down, or that I realized like how unhappy I genuinely was with my lifestyle, that I was like, okay, this needs to change.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I came out of the keto phase and the intermittent fasting phase, and the weight started coming back on again. And it was like, oh, no, 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 this can't be happening. I need to go back to that because that's where my value was. And so really having to do my work around where I was placing value in my looks and my body type. And and this was years down the track, and I was with a partner, and he would literally say to me, your body type does not matter to me as long as you're happy in your body. You don't need to be stick thin. You don't need to have abs, just whatever you're comfortable with. I'll love you through all of it. And I couldn't accept it for so long. I'm like, but you're lying to me. He was the first
Mm-hmm.
person in my life that actually had said those words, that I accept you for what your body looked like. And I went through a really tough time after I had babies. Oh my gosh, that was a struggle, from going to, a party lifestyle, looking really good, loving my pregnant body. And then like what you're left with after a pregnant body, it's like, oh, hang on. This is not what I signed up for. And so it's been such a journey with that, and it's only, in fairly recent times that I've really just put everything down and going, I'm just going to love it so hardcore for where it's at. And I still have those moments. It's still like, oh, this bit, oh, bit. And then I'm like, no, just come back, be gentle, be loving. But my gosh, it's been such a journey.
Yeah, it has. There were so many things, like as you were talking, I was like, oh, this point, this point, this point. Two of the things that I would say in kind of response to that, because I know you're not the only woman that has gone through all of that stuff, is one, recognizing that our bodies, especially as women, are meant to change throughout the lifespan. In fact, I had a post come up. It was like a reminder, a memory from last year, and it was exactly on that. When our bodies change from pre-puberty through puberty, that's totally normal. We completely expect there are going to be changes. We welcome them in, or we're at least like, oh yeah, we knew this was going to happen. But then for whatever reason, due to age or menopause or pregnancy bodies and post-pregnancy, we think that our body should always go back to like what it was, like, whatever that time is that we felt like, oh my gosh, I looked the best, I was getting all this external validation, like you said, that's what I need to go back to. And so I would say, like, first, can we just normalize that our bodies are going to change throughout the lifespan, and that's normal, it's healthy, it's fine. One of the other things that came to mind is that this is why it can be so damaging to comment on people's bodies, to compliment people for weight loss. Nobody had any clue of what you were going through personally. And they're just seeing, what your body looks like. And so, like you said, it just kind of reinforces potentially very unhealthy behaviors. Oh, I just need to keep doing this. And
Mm,
I had that, similar experience. Like I looked the best maybe on the outside, but it was, the more validation you get, the more you're like, oh my gosh, I wasn't getting this when I didn't look like that. So I guess I have to keep going on this hamster wheel so that people will keep validating. And, I feel way more comfortable now in my body than I ever did at my leanest, because there it was like I was always worried about losing it. Right. Whereas now I feel at home, I feel comfortable. And that's what I want for every woman. One other thing to kind of highlight is that so much of the diet and the weight loss and all of this research that's being done is not being done on women. And I
mm,
like to highlight to people, a lot of times you'll have like a husband and a wife or two, significant other, and they're starting a weight loss journey together. They're eating the same, they're, both doing the same workouts. The man gets completely shredded, loses a ton of weight, and the woman gains weight, or her body, her body stays the same. And so I do think that also it's wise to look at, okay, how can I maybe eat or train in a way that honors my body as a woman, that is going to really support my life for the long haul. Because if you do something to lose weight, but you cannot see yourself living life that way forever, then you're going to most likely gain all of that weight and then extra back. And this happens every time we lose weight through dieting. And so,
happened to me. Yeah. I actually, I had an interesting conversation with a friend who I used to do intermittent fasting, and we used to drink exogenous ketones, and he had incredible results, as men do. He trained in a very different way, very different body type and body composition. And it was interesting because I've been out of that, for quite a number of years. And I posted on my Instagram story a little while ago. I was at the beach. It was like 6:30 in the morning. I'd already gone for a beautiful beach walk, and I was having an acai bowl. And I hadn't spoken to this guy for a little while, but he chose to message me and say, if only you ate the acai bowl after lunch and had the beach walk fasted, you'd live longer. I tore shreds. It got me, because it's like, shut the fuck up. Mind your fucking business. Get
mhm,
out of my DMs with your opinion. Let me eat the food. Let me go for the walk. Like, and I know that he meant well. I know that he meant nothing of it. In fact, we had just lost a mutual acquaintance that we both know. She'd
mm,
passed away from cancer, and like in her early 30s. So I was already going through a process with, her leaving this earth so early, and the fact that he's like, you'll live longer, because I just, look, maybe there's some truth to it, because, the intermittent fasting community will say this, this, and the other. But what I started doing a few years ago was talking to people who'd been through, the keto journey or the intermittent fasting. And as you said, none of this research is done on women, especially
mhm,
menstruating women.
mhm,
And when I started looking into it, I found that it was all based on men's experiences. And so I said to him, I'm like, show me the research that says this is actually supportive for a menstruating woman. And then he just went bang, 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 like slam, 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 slam. And like very toxically turn it around on me. I mean, the conversation, we ended up just blocking each other. We were just like,
yeah. I
no,
was like,
no,
okay,
we're
this
done.
is maybe not.
Exactly. We're done. We're done. Right. But this is the thing. Like, women have been told for so long how to be, what to do. Like, he knew nothing of my journey, for the last few years,
Mhm,
knowing nothing about the experience that I've had, being on this cycle, of going around and around with these different ways of being. And the fact that we were drinking exogenous ketones meant that we weren't eating the keto diet. It was almost like, well, you can eat anything, just drink exogenous ketones and you'll get ripped.
yeah.
And so I mean, that's got a toxic undertone to it anyway, to think that you can just bypass it,
Mhm,
because I've always been, looking for the quick fix. How can I get this weight off the quickest? how can I do this the quickest? It's never been up until now about that long-term journey, and something that you mentioned before about, doing it for the long-term version. I was overseas earlier in the year, and I was over in Paris with my mom, and she had a fall and she broke her hip. And, unfortunately, due to health complications, she's got brittle bones anyway. So you or I would, have a fall and we'd probably bruise, whereas she breaks. And,
Mhm.
it really, really highlighted for me that, I'm 37 now. I really need to be focused instead of on like going back to how I once was or doing it for the external validation. I need to do this for my old lady inside of me that's going to be like so thankful of 37-year-old Jen, who's like, okay, we're lifting weights at the gym, not to get shredded, not to post it on Instagram, but because we actually get to have stronger joints and stronger muscles
Mhm.
moving in to older age, because I don't want to be living my life where I'm, abiding by broken bones. I want to be still jumping out of airplanes and bungee jumping at 90. That's my goal, and so being able to reframe that and looking into the long term has been a huge, huge wake up call for me.
Yeah. And I would say, I mean, unfortunately, you had that experience with that person, with that guy. And I mean, everybody, we've all gone through that, unfortunately. People just like to give their opinions. And I do think it's a fine line sometimes between looking at like health and longevity and then living your life almost in a way of fear, right? It's like we're just so consumed with trying to live longer and trying to, avoid every possible type of cancer. So, it is an interesting place, but I also love that you have kind of shifted the focus where it's like, let's think long term.
Mm.
Where do we want to be when we're 90? Do we want to be like dependent on other people? Or do we want to still maybe be able to do most daily living activities kind of on our own? And for me, I don't know that that necessarily would come before you're into your 30s, but I am hearing that more and more. It's like, it is less about what my body looks like. And it truly is more about the quality of life that I'm able to live now, but also thinking about the quality of life that I want to be living, 50, 60, 70 years down the road. And what I do find with the women that I work with is it's like the more that we can kind of put the weight loss goal kind of on the shelf, the easier it is to actually work on the things that are going to get you the weight loss goal in and of itself, right? And
Mm.
so, but with the dieting mentality, we've been so conditioned to like hyper focus on the scale, hyper focus on is my body changing every day? And then when the scale goes up from time to time, or when we're not noticing changes as fast, we get discouraged. We think none of this is working. And if we're miserable, then it's so easy to give up versus if you're losing weight in a way that you want to live your life and you're not obsessed on the scale and you really are just thinking about like, this truly is a lifestyle and I want to set myself up, well down the road, then we have to a lot of times kind of put that weight loss goal on the back burner for a bit.
I love it. Alicia, what are some of the foundations that we want to start to encourage? So, for anyone listening to this that are like, I'm so done with the diet culture, I'm done with the up and down, the yo yoing, where do people start? What are the foundational things that we need to start implementing in order to have a different experience that is going to be sustainable and enjoyable and, supportive?
Yeah, I think a great place to start is really examining your food story, right? Or examining, your story about what was modeled for me. Like what, if I were to write a book on this, like what is that story that's kind of playing on repeat in my head about what my body should look like? How much should I weigh? How should I be eating? How should I be living my life? Once we start to kind of pull some of that sort of subconscious thinking to the forefront and we get it on paper. We don't want to just let it, bring it up and then just let it swirl in our brains, but actually get it on paper. That creates some distance between us and our thoughts. And then we can start to kind of examine that a little bit more closely and decide if that's something we still want to keep and we still want to operate based on, or do those thoughts need a little bit of a makeover? right? So it's like, let's get it all out on paper. Let's reread the story. Let's decide what needs editing. And then we want to rewrite the story. So, what do we want to believe instead? How do we want to live our lives instead? How do we want to move forward from this point on? I think that's a great place to start. For me, like I said, the intuitive eating framework was helpful to a degree in a lot of ways of just, challenging kind of that inner food police and challenging the diet rules that you live by. Really learning how to make peace with food, right? So looking at food in more of a neutral perspective versus good and bad foods. Ironically, like the more neutral we can look at food and approach it, the easier it is to make decisions, because we're not going to feel deprived. We're not going to feel restricted. And usually that's one of the things that kind of has people rebounding to where they can be good or diet for, a week or two at a time. And then they kind of rebound and end up binging. And then you end up in sort of that unhealthy, unhelpful cycle. So, challenge those food rules, learn to make peace with food. It's all neutral, and really work on your story around food and around your weight and your body.
I love that. I love that. One of the things that I do is I have a little sticky note on my fridge near the handle, and it says, "What does nourishment feel like today?"
Mm,
Because when you come from a place, like you said, of, just taking that sting, that polarity of good or bad out of food, because it is actually neither. It's fuel. We need to start, shifting our mindset around what it actually is for us. And so for me, it's like, well, I want to feel nourished. Let's look at what we do want, not let's focus on what we don't want. It's that general, that towards and away motivation. What do we want to move towards as opposed to, trying to get away from?
yeah.
And so what I found in my journey is like, oh, I don't want to be this way anymore. I don't want to be. And then, like, obviously when I started studying, coaching, NLP, all the things, and you start listening to your own, inner talk and that inner dialogue, you're like, well, hang on a second. What is it that you do want?
Yeah.
you know and for me it was like, well, I want nourishment. Oh, okay, well, I want the foods that are going in that I'm going to feel alive from, that I'm going to feel nourished by, that I'm going to feel energized to do the things that I get to do all day every day. So for me, that's one of the big ones, is just moving towards what I do want,
Hmm.
which has been really, really powerful. Alicia, we'll obviously link to everything in your show notes, in the show notes, with your website and how people can contact you. Tell us about how you work with people. Is it just online? Is it in person? What does that look like?
Yeah. So currently I'm doing a little bit of both. I mean, obviously you'd have to be local for us to work in person, but thank goodness for Zoom and virtual meetings. So I work with people both in person and virtually. Right now, I am still working with my clients in a one-to-one capacity, with some potential group opportunities kind of on the horizon. I do really like to take a little bit of a longer approach. So typically when I'm working with people, we start working together for 12 months. And what I love about that is that it gives you opportunity to have some success and some wins right off the bat. And then life starts to creep in, life starts to happen, and you're not stuck trying to figure out how to do that on your own. And then you can move into what I call kind of a maintenance phase, but you still sort of have your coach alongside to help you really solidify what you've learned and to take that so that it really does result in long term lasting transformation.
Beautiful. And if there is a piece of wisdom that you could impart on our listeners that might feel as though, they've been on this journey of up and down, yo-yoing, on and off the hamster wheel, and they're just so ready to love their bodies and, have a different perspective on nutrition and movement, what would you say to them?
Well, I would say it's going to feel scary because you're essentially leaving everything that you've ever known. You're challenging beliefs that have probably been hardwired in from the time that you were little. But lean into that fear. I mean, if you are truly exhausted from dieting and you don't want to live your life like that anymore, then there is no other option than to try something different. And so I can definitely tell you that, even though it was very scary initially, and I had to kind of combat a lot of that internal fear and dialogue that, wanted to kind of get me to go back, I am so grateful that I didn't cave into that, because the life that I'm living now is so much bigger than it ever was when I was the smallest, the lightest, the leanest that I was. And I think, you just really have to think about, like, if I were to look back on my life, what would I want to be known for? Right. And it really hits hard when you think about the things that people are going to remember about you is not going to be what size jeans you wore, what your body looked like. And for me, I think that really put it into perspective that maybe I'm devoting too much of my time and my energy and my gifts and my talents being distracted by this. And what could I create if I wasn't so focused on this particular area?
I love it. That's amazing. I have one last question before we wrap up. And Alisha, what is the meaning of life to you?
Oh gosh. Oh my gosh. This is like, wow. How do you distill that into a single thought? I mean, I guess at the end of the day, like, if I were to lean back on my faith, I feel like my purpose is, at the end of the day, to glorify my creator. And it's to love other people. So it's loving God, loving other people. And, I certainly don't model that perfectly every day, but, I'm still trying. So
You mean like you're human? Okay.
yeah, yeah, I'm human. I'm sharing in the human experience with everybody else. So
Oh, you've been amazing. Thank you so much for all of your wisdom. Like I said, we'll link to everything in the show notes so that you can get in touch with Alisha, connect with her on Instagram as well. Alisha, thank you so much for joining me on the Enlighten podcast.
thank you, Jen, for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. I hope you love the Enlighten podcast, and the biggest compliment you can give me is subscribing to this podcast, sharing it, and leaving a rating and review. Feel free to follow me on Instagram. My handle is @JenHamiltonOfficial, and the podcast handle is enlightened_podcast. You can also find the video version on YouTube on my channel. Just search Enlightened, and don't forget to hit subscribe. Have a beautiful day and enjoy living the enlightened journey of life.